As the sky darkened and thick, gray clouds gathered, heavy with impending rain, the guards stationed on the rooftop looked up with frustration. They had been assigned to watch over Hyunho, who lay unconscious on the rooftop in his hospital pajamas. The younger of the two guards, clearly irritated by the looming downpour, glanced at the older gray-haired henchman and asked how much longer they would be stuck up there, especially with the rain about to start. The older henchman, hardened by years of experience, scowled and gruffly reminded him that they had to wait for a signal, though he didn't know what form it would take. The mention of a signal surprised the younger man, who hadn't been told anything about it. The older henchman speculated it might be a phone call and added coldly that once the signal came, they would throw Hyunho off the rooftop, ending the job. The first drops of rain began to fall, soaking the henchman and Hyunho alike, but the two guards stood firm, unwavering despite the wetness creeping through their clothes. A third henchman, making his way to the rooftop, grumbled about the annoying wait in the rain and wondered aloud why they couldn't just throw Hyunho over the side now. The raindrops slicked Hyunho's hair and clothes, making him appear even more vulnerable. The older henchman, with sadistic amusement, crouched in front of Hyunho, his voice laced with glee. He growled at the unconscious boy, accusing him of hearing everything. Hyunho, though unmoving, was awake, his eyes wide open, paralyzed by fear. The older henchman dragged him roughly by the collar, growling about how they were the ones suffering in the rain, while Hyunho merely lay there, helpless. As Hyunho was dragged toward the chain-link fence at the edge of the roof, he finally found his voice, trembling, pleading to be let go. The older henchman mocked him, reminding him that he had survived a fall from the 4th floor before, and this time he should stop being a nuisance and die properly. Hyunho, trembling, looked over the edge, the memory of his previous fall flashing before his eyes, making his heart race. His stomach churned as the terror overwhelmed him, and he clamped a hand over his mouth before vomiting violently over the rooftop's edge. The henchman recoiled in disgust, cursing at the added indignity of having to endure both the rain and the mess. Before they could react further, a child's voice cut through the rain. Eugene, his clothes and hair drenched from the downpour, approached with cold, calculating eyes. He spoke to Hyunho, confirming his identity with a tone that was chillingly indifferent. The henchman turned in shock, surprised to see a child at the school so late at night. Ignoring their stares, Eugene mocked Hyunho, calling him weak and pathetic, his appearance matching the information he had. Hyunho, terrified, asked who Eugene was, but instead of answering, Eugene flicked open a butterfly knife, casually explaining that he was a regular at Hyunho's mother's snack bar. The wicked smile that followed sent a chill through the air as the blade locked into place. One of the henchmen, veins bulging in anger, drew his own knife, demanding to know if Eugene was from Dead Mansion. Before the question could fully register, Eugene moved like a shadow, an invisible slash tearing through the air. The knife-wielding henchman screamed as blood gushed from his arm, while another henchman collapsed from a deep cut to his leg. The remaining guard shouted in panic, unable to comprehend Eugene's speed. As Hyunho watched in stunned silence, his mind reeled. What kind of child was this? Eugene wiped the blade clean of blood with a flick of his wrist, standing tall and unbothered by the rain. The final henchman, realizing the danger, fumbled for the gun strapped to his side, his hands shaking as he removed it from its holster. Hyunho's heart raced in disbelief. This man had a gun. As Eugene slashed at one of the injured henchmen trying to stand, Hyunho's eyes caught the glint of metal. The gunman was loading his weapon, and Eugene was oblivious. Fear gripped Hyunho, but Eugene's mocking words, calling him pathetic, replayed in his head. His teeth clenched in determination. As the henchman raised his gun and took aim at Eugene, Hyunho acted. With a burst of courage, he tackled the henchman, throwing off his aim just as the gun fired, the bullet going wide. Hyunho bit down hard on the henchman's ear, his screams muffled as he bit with all his strength. The henchman howled in pain, thrashing and shouting threats, but Hyunho refused to let go. The gun was pointed directly at his forehead, the cold metal pressing against his skin. Fear washed over him, But before the shot could fire, Eugene delivered a brutal kick to the henchman's face, the sickening sound of bone and cartilage breaking echoing through the rain. Eugene, with a calm smile, looked down at Hyunho, and with a hint of amusement, remarked that perhaps he had underestimated him. Hyunho may prove useful. In the dimly lit school parking lot, the rain poured relentlessly over the concrete, drumming against a black van with dark, tinted windows that sat conspicuously in the corner. Inside, Mari groaned awake, her head throbbing as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Her confusion was quickly interrupted by Rachel, who was crouched on the van's floor, her eyes cold and calculating. Rachel remarked with an indifferent tone that it was fortunate Mari had woken up. If she had died, it would have been an inconvenience for Rachel. As Mari's mind cleared, she cursed under her breath, immediately asking if she had lost the fight against Sion. Rachel, her expression dripping with disdain, glanced at her. Mari, frustrated and disoriented, demanded to know where Sion was, but Rachel seemed uninterested, casually fiddling with a small red box. She mentioned that Sion had left behind his clothes, a flimsy excuse in her opinion, adding that he had probably gone off searching for Hyunho and his mother. At that moment, Sion was seen running at full sprint inside the school, his urgency palpable under the falling rain. Back in the van, Rachel removed a syringe from the red box and, without warning, plunged it into Mari's thigh. The sudden sting made Mari wince, and before she could react, Rachel discarded the used syringe carelessly, her tone shifting to one of cold command. She informed Mari that she had been injected with a type of confession drug, warning that any further doses could lead to fatal shock. As Mari processed this, Rachel's hand shot out, violently grabbing a fistful of her hair and slamming her head against the van's metal wall. With a demonic, furious expression, Rachel loomed over her, demanding to know what Mari had been scheming behind her back. Despite the violent interrogation, Mari laughed, her lips curling into a wicked grin. She told Rachel that if that was her question, they could have skipped the confession drug altogether. She was more than happy to explain. With her hair still gripped tightly in Rachel's fist, Mari spoke, her smile widening. She confessed that she had been planning to partly demolish the current iteration of Dead Mansion with Noel's help. Rachel, still bruised and bloodied from earlier battles, froze at the mention of Noel, her expression darkening into something that could chill the blood. Rachel's voice, now dangerously quiet, demanded to know if Mari was claiming that Noel was still alive. Mari's grin only widened, enjoying the shift in power. She leaned forward despite the painful grip on her hair, taunting Rachel. She teased that Rachel seemed worried about Noel, recounting how Noel had told her he had left a wound on Rachel's forehead before he disappeared, regretting that he hadn't even been able to apologize. With a final taunting smile, Mari delivered the devastating blow. The true legend of Dead Mansion, Noel, was indeed alive. The words struck Rachel hard, her expression transforming from cold fury to utter shock, the revelation hitting her like a physical blow. For a moment, her icy composure shattered, leaving her reeling from the truth Mari had just revealed. As Sion sprinted through the dimly lit hallways of the school, the rain drumming against the windows, his heart raced. He scanned the rows of classrooms, searching desperately for a sign of Hyunho. Suddenly, one classroom caught his eye, and through the window, he spotted Hyunho's mother slumped unconscious against a desk. Panic surged through him as he skidded to a halt, shouting from outside the room, his voice cracking with desperation as he called out, "Ma'am!" At the sound of his voice, she muttered her son's name faintly, and Sion let out a breath of relief. Despite her state, she seemed uninjured. He slid open the door to rush in, but as he stepped forward, he was overwhelmed by memories of their last bitter encounter. His mind flashed back to the moment she slapped him, her face twisted with betrayal, and Rachel's cruel smile as their scheme to drive a wedge between him and Hyunho's mother succeeded. Sion hesitated, shame and guilt crashing over him. Unable to face her, he quietly slid the door shut again, too ashamed to step inside. His self-pity was interrupted by Eugene's sudden arrival, who, with his usual sharpness, commented on Sion's disheveled appearance. Still clouded by sadness, Sion looked up, his voice soft as he asked if Eugene was hurt. His words trailed off when he saw Hyunho standing behind Eugene, surprised to see him. Hyunho immediately demanded to know why Sion was there, but Eugene cut him off, proudly introducing Sion as the one who had defeated the henchman targeting Hyunho. Standing beside Sion with a grin, Eugene seemed amused by the whole situation. Hyunho, however, was anything but amused. Hobbling on his crutches, his expression twisted in anger, he demanded to know what all this talk of Russian mercenaries and Dead Mansion had to do with him. His outburst surprised Eugene, but Hyunho wasn't finished. Limping forward, he confronted Sion, accusing him of being the reason for all his misfortune. His words cut deep as he pressed Sion to admit that it was his fault that Hyunho's life had fallen apart. Sion, unable to meet Hyunho's eyes, began to stammer out a confession, but before he could speak, Eugene's eyes flicked to the side. He had spotted Hyunho's mother still slumped at her desk. In a rush, Eugene pushed the sliding door open, shouting in alarm as Hyunho, now panicking, called out to his mother. As he shook her gently, trying to wake her, Sion stepped into the room. His expression serious, he quietly told Eugene that Rachel was in the parking lot, waiting in a black van. He instructed Eugene to take Hyunho and his mother and join her there. Eugene, sensing the shift in Sion's demeanor, questioned the sudden urgency, but Sion only patted his head with a rare moment of tenderness, assuring him it was nothing to worry about. As Sion called out to Hyunho, who was now struggling to carry his mother with Eugene's help, he promised to explain everything soon. His voice, heavy with regret, cracked as he apologized. He clenched his fists until his veins bulged, sorrow etched on his face, lamenting that he couldn't protect anything. The apology seemed to fall on deaf ears as Hyunho, supported by Eugene, led his mother out of the classroom. But just as they were about to leave, Hyunho turned, his gaze piercing as he told Sion that he expected a full explanation about what Sion had been trying to protect and why he felt so guilty. Sion's eyes, previously filled with shame, now hardened with determination. He promised Hyunho that he would give him the answers he sought. As the trio left the school, Sion's mood shifted completely. He turned to the darkened corridor, his voice low and steady, calling out for the hidden presence to reveal itself. From the shadows, a lone figure stepped forward, the corridor seemingly filled with an eerie, malevolent aura. The figure exuded a smoky, almost supernatural presence, and as he approached, Sion's eyes narrowed, taken aback by the dark energy that surrounded him. The man, tall and lithe, with an unsettling smile, stopped just short of Sion, complimenting his sharp observation skills. His black hair was slicked back, and he wore a simple white-collared shirt with the top 2 buttons undone, paired with black work slacks. In his hand, he wrapped a cloth around his knuckles, forming makeshift hand wraps. The man, still smiling, observed Sion's blonde hair and blue eyes, guessing that he must be the legendary Sion. His demeanor was casual, even as he admitted that he had been nervous to meet Sion, expecting someone far more terrifying. The words were light, but the threat behind them was unmistakable. Sion, anger flickering in his eyes, demanded to know who the man was. The man's smile widened as he introduced himself as Jang Hyun. With his hand wraps now securely in place, he repeated his name, the menace in his voice unmistakable. Jang Hyun.